Any loss of a parent can leave an emotional wound on a kid that it can affect you all your life, really. But when the abandonment was intentional and your parent left the family for, I don't know, someone new and they didn't return, or they only sporadically made contact when it was convenient for them, but not when you needed them, or they totally went away, a pattern gets laid down that can be really hard to break in your adult relationships. How many times have you fallen for someone only to find that you weren't valued? You were being used. You were not treated like a real person. You were the side chick. And then you held on to the relationship anyway. The consequences of this pattern, they don't just go away when you meet the right person, because the pattern actually will drive the right person away before they even get to know you. And I want to talk about how that happens. Now, I got a letter from a 25-year-old woman I'll call Emmy, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I had a crappy childhood which made me hyper-independent but deeply insecure about my looks and self-esteem. My father was pretty much absent, and he and my mom never really had a relationship, but they didn't break up either. He was an alcoholic and died when I was 12. But up until then, the dynamic was that he was coming home to me, my brother, and my mom. He lived in a different town, and he would pick up a random job, usually with my mom's help and connections, and he would stay with us for several months, not giving us a penny, and after that, all of a sudden, without saying anything, he would just leave and go back to his town. My mom let this happen all the time, and I was used to the back and forth relationship they had. And now that I'm an adult, I go to therapy because I need help with this, as I realize the depths in which the whole situation has affected me." So fast forward, Emmy says, to a few years ago, when I met someone at work who I thought would be amazing for me. He was charming, young, smart, and generally cool. I was several months out of my 3-year relationship, which was a fail in its own right, and I was concentrating on my job that I had recently started. One day when I saw this guy, let's call him Noah, I felt as if it was meant to be, as if time stopped and I could only see him at that moment. Soon after that, we went out after work, and it turned out he actually had a girlfriend. And that was the first red flag. But I was too into him, and we ended up secretly hooking up shortly after. This went on for a while, and it was good. We went on dates, to the theater, and he treated me like a princess. But he was still in a relationship and didn't do anything about it. It was also his first time ever cheating, and I felt as if I were a horrible person because I let him do this. Late around Christmas time that year, just before my birthday, he said his girlfriend had come to visit him randomly at his university town, and that they were on good terms, and so he just wanted me to know. And I was broken because this meant it was over. Now, after that, we had no contact for 5 months when I received a phone call from him saying that they broke up, and he would like to take me on a date and see where things could go. I still loved him deeply, and I agreed. We had sex on our first meeting. Red flag number 2, he was very clear he didn't want anything serious from me, but my damaged self hoped he would maybe turn to love me if I was persistent enough. Stupid, I know, says Emmy. This hooking up experience, which I thought would turn into a relationship, would continue for a solid year. With this being said, I never got to meet his friends. He would tell me about the parties he went to, but I was never invited. He kept my existence secret from his world, and that hurt me very much, but I coped with it because I thought I would lose him if I pushed for anything serious. Red flag, I know. The last month of that year of hooking up, everything seemed nice, and I was hopeful. We saw each other the day before his birthday. I gave him a present I had prepared in advance. He really liked it. The next day he celebrated his birthday, and I was not invited. Then a whole month passed, and he was totally silent. No calls, no messages, nothing. When I would message him, he would not answer for hours. Finally, I saw on Instagram he uploaded a picture of himself with another girl. Clearly, they are together, and I broke down like I've never done before in my life. The girl looks a lot like me, which made me feel even worse because that to me meant that my personality was the issue. All right, some people really don't like the sound of my pencil, but here we go, because this is how I make notes for myself. I really want to come back to that I'm going to read the letter again after this. I had stomach aches for weeks after that. When I messaged him to ask what was going on, he said that he didn't feel obliged to inform me of what was going on in his life. After 2 years of knowing this person, being his friend and sexual partner, he said this. It made me downward spiral pretty badly and triggered my childhood abandonment issues. I unfollowed him on Instagram and Facebook, but throughout the time that passed, I leaned in to message him several times, which I deeply regret. It has now been 7 months since I've seen him, and this happened, and I can't seem to stop thinking about him. It got to the point where I obsessively check on him on social media, fantasize about him, and wait for him to come back again. Rationally, I know this will not happen, and I'm wasting my time and energy, and that I deserve better, but this is my childhood loop of waiting for my dad to return. My therapist describes both my dad and this guy Noah as narcissists and tries to help me let go, but so far I've not had much success. Now we live in the same city and I'm constantly scared we're going to randomly meet and he would be with this girl. Sometimes I fantasize about him seeing me on the street and regretting his decision to leave me. My self-esteem has been totally destroyed and I have developed a fear of men in general. I'm afraid I will remain alone and lonely because of this, and I'm deeply scared. I'm deeply sad and confused, and I know I need to move on, but I have no idea how. Thank you for helping me. I really need help and advice. Warm regards, Emmy. Okay, Emmy, I know how, and I'm going to help you, all right? There is a way, and I'm going to teach you how you can do this tactically, and how you can prevent this from happening again, and how you can make sure that you leave behind all the intense emotions of what happened here. It's going to involve a little bit of tough love, okay? But it'll be said with love, so get ready. Here we go. All right, I'm going through the letter again. Emmy, your childhood, my heart just flies out to you. This is awful. It's just awful. This thing where your parents broke up and got together and broke up and got together and he was never really with you and he came back when it was convenient. I can totally see how that would have affected you. Everything that you're describing just sounds like a really logical wound, like acting on a wound. I get it. It's not that different from how I grew up, too. I understand it very deeply, actually. And then the no money and your mom putting up with it and not doing anything about it because whatever, maybe you understand her feelings as few others can now because you're in the middle of, tolerating that kind of behavior, too, or trying not to anymore. So you met this guy, Noah, at work, and he seemed amazing, charming, young, smart, generally cool. And you were several months out of a 3-year relationship that was terrible. And focusing on your job. So you were like all good, all primed, all that good place that we get to after a painful breakup, but we're kind of, operating really well again. So good. You're in that place, very attractive, I bet. And one day you saw him, and I'm just circling the word saw. All you did was see him, and you got limerence about him. And if anybody hasn't heard the word limerence is the word for an obsession or infatuation for somebody that's not really a relationship. Sometimes there's a quasi-relationship or a friendship or a friends with benefits thing, or sometimes there's no relationship at all. It could be for a celebrity or somebody you once knew. But the sign of it is you'll be looking for signs of hope that you can hold on to. And it can go on a very long time, and it's a horrible, painful way to throw away good years of your life. So we take limerence really seriously here. It's really, really common for people who are traumatized and abandoned and not treated like real people. You were a real girl with real feelings and needs who needed real love and real presence from real parents. So this is not your fault that this happened, but here it is. And a lot of us here, we totally get it, all right? So you had a feeling that it was meant to be. It was like time stopped and you could only see him at the moment. That's the kind of description that we grew up on in pop songs and love stories on TV, but it also is just like classic limerence. Time stops, it's meant to be. It's possible that we could have those feelings with somebody it would work out with, and that's considered one of the ways that limerence can turn out is that the two people actually get together, and then real life sets in and causes the limerence to crumble and fall away. But usually it doesn't end up with two people getting together. It's a little different too than, it has all those signs of what ordinary falling in love is like, which is also kind of magical and, hyper real. But the main thing about it is you're really zeroing in on somebody who is not giving it back to you. That's kind of the main thing. That's what we're concerned about here. Okay. So soon after that, you and Noah went out after work and you learned right away he actually had a girlfriend. So that was the first red flag. And I just circled your use of the word red flag. You mentioned that here. You sometimes say it about yourself. I think you're saying it about him here. But when somebody has a girlfriend and you would like to date them, that's not a red flag. Just for definition here, I want to suggest a different definition. A red flag is a sign that somebody is bad for you. Now, this may qualify as that too. But the fact that he's dating that he has a girlfriend is not a red flag. It's a no flag. It's a no-go zone. It's a barrier. It's a wall. It's a giant fence. He's somebody you can't date because he has a girlfriend. Now, we know that some people end up together because they went in and started dating somebody, secretly. That has happened before, but it doesn't tend to go well. It doesn't tend to happen often. And if you have CPTSD and your attachment wounds are running the show, it will pretty much drive you into a very sad, lost place. And so for those of us with CPTSD, this is what I teach here. We set ourselves a higher standard. We just set ourselves a higher standard. And one thing we don't do is date people who already have somebody. All right. And then you mentioned there that you were too into him and you ended up secretly hooking up shortly thereafter. So that's another thing. If you want to heal from CPTSD, the high standard I suggest you adopt is don't have relationships in secret. Don't go out with anybody where you have to hide it from the people in their life or your life, okay? And I would, with the exception of maybe like some abuser from your past, that would be appropriate to have that boundary. But nobody with another partner already, nobody who requires you to become a liar. Becoming a liar is so destabilizing for anybody, let alone somebody with CPTSD, because what is that wound? It's a wound to our ability to perceive like what's true and what's real. And you know how when you get involved in something deceptive is you lose track of reality yourself. It'll start to take your CPTSD symptoms and just weaken you. It'll start to bring you down. It's very toxic to have to do anything dishonest. And as a practical matter, who wants to date somebody who lies, right? Who wants to date somebody who cheats? Now, I totally understand. A lot of us have done it here, but I'm just like laying out reality here because I'm on the other side of that. And I woke up and I'm here. I'm just like, no, don't date somebody who cheats. They're not a good boyfriend. They're just not a good boyfriend or girlfriend. Somebody who cheats. And they've just shown you it's more than a red flag. It's a wall. It's a no flag. Okay. So this secret hooking up went on for a while, and it was good, you say lightly. Oh, it's good. It's like, well, I question that word good. I don't think it was good. We went on dates to the theater, and he treated me like a princess. Okay, hold on, Emmy. This is where you're crap fitting. You're compartmentalizing your experience, so you can say, when we were at the theater, he opened doors for me, he bought the tickets, we had a nice dinner. It was like being a princess, except for the part where then he has to hide you from his life and doesn't spend time with you, and you're not invited to his birthday party, and he goes home and he's sleeping with somebody else. Okay, that is not the princess treatment. Not the princess treatment at all. That's treating you as a booty call. Okay, that's the tough love. It's not even friends with benefits because it involves a great big lie. It's definitely putting you in this secret, second-rate relationship. And we could talk till the cows come home about what's wrong with this guy, why is he doing this, and people in the comments are going to want to. But I'll just remind you, he didn't write to me. You wrote to me, and I want to teach you how to get away from him and this kind of thing, and how you can head this off so that you just don't you don't get wrapped up in this. Because once you go down this road, it just has a way of like binding you to it. It's so hard to get out. It's a lot easier to stay out in the first place. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So he was in a relationship and he didn't do anything about it. So this was comfortable for him to have his public girlfriend and his secret girlfriend. All right, that worked. He was doing something about it. He was juggling it all, and you were making it work for him. All right, you were part of this too. You made that work. You respected this thing where you had to be secret. you continued to answer his calls. And I'm not saying this to be mean or trying to get in your face or anything. I'm just trying to help you, because what happens, I saw, your therapist, what you quoted your therapist anyway is like, oh, they're narcissists. I don't know if your dad and this guy was a narcissist. I definitely hear there's something with your dad. I think this guy's being a jerk at the very least. But our concern is not what is wrong with the other people. Our concern is about helping you take back all your power, all of it, and no longer relying on the belief that other people they're sick and they're going to change, or they're sick and it's their fault. Like at this point in time, if you continue to stay connected to people who treat you this way, now the responsibility has just come 100% into your hands. You are the one who gets to decide whether you date people like this. And I know how hard it is. I know how your mind plays tricks on you, and I'm going to teach you how to support yourself so that you can exercise that power that you have and have always had, that you just couldn't access because of CPTSD. You can access your own power to stay out of trouble like this, and to instead save your energy to direct towards somebody who really fits what you want to. Then you say it was also his first time ever cheating. Maybe, but I have a feeling it's not going to be his last, okay? And I felt that I was a horrible person because I have let him do this. So just from one woman to another, from one person who has had codependent thinking around this stuff to another, the problem isn't that you let him do it. It's not your responsibility to stop him from treating his public girlfriend in this way. It's your responsibility to not do this yourself. So the horrible person feeling is some shame. And the shame, I always make a difference between earned shame and free-floating shame that we just sort of inherit from people treating us badly. But sometimes we do things that we authentically feel ashamed of. And it would be like having a secret relationship with somebody is, it's wrong. It's just wrong, right? And there is a third party, his public girlfriend, who apparently is being deceived, and you're part of that. Even though the boyfriend, I know everybody's going to be like, no, but the boyfriend, he's the one. Totally, he's the center of the problem. But anybody who goes along with it is corroborating with him. They're being part of the problem too. And that is a bad feeling. And even if you can't acknowledge it in the moment, it's going to be in the back of your mind. You're like, I don't know, I just feel ashamed of myself. So that's a really important piece of healing too, is that learning to get real about anything that you're doing that is earning you a feeling of guilt or shame, resentment at yourself, that you're not living up to your own standards of how to be the good person who you really were made to be and can be and need to be. That it feels good to be your best self. All right. So just I'm validating that feeling you have. It's real. So then you say late around Christmas time that year, just before my birthday, he said his girlfriend had come to visit him randomly in his university town, and they were on good terms. So he just wanted me to know. And I was all broken up because this meant it was over. So gosh, what an inglorious ending. I just wanted you to know she's here. And you knew it was over. But good, over is a good place to be in this situation because it was tearing your life apart and keeping you out of having any kind of real love. So after that, you had no contact for 5 months when you received a phone call from him saying that they broke up and he'd like to take me on a date and see where things could go. So when I was reading your letter, I was like, oh, see where things could go. So maybe that kind of, cruddy second-rate relationship that you guys had, maybe it planted a seed and he thought, maybe really he really did have feelings. And you say, I still loved him deeply, and I agreed. Then you say, we had sex on our first meeting. Okay, I'm going to circle that. You knew I would, right? Red flag number 2, you said. The next thing you say is, he was very clear he didn't want anything serious from me. And then, so I'm just wondering, so what does it mean when he says he wants to see where things could go? I'm guessing it just means what? First base, second base, third base, fourth base, right? Where can it go if he's not going to do anything serious? So I guess he was testing the waters to see if you would go back and be a sort of secret friend with benefits. You say your damaged self hoped he would maybe turn to love you if you were persistent enough. And you say stupid, I know. And I want you to stop calling yourself stupid. I would just say traumatized. That's trauma-driven thinking. It's not just you. It's like everybody who got treated like you will go into that thinking and just think, maybe I can earn the love. Because I agree that is probably a vestige of what came from your parents. On the other hand, I don't think it's that helpful to just keep thinking, I act this way, I feel this way because my parents. Like, yes, that started it, but now you're busy creating your own self-traumatizing behaviors. And in time, those will start to take over your life till you can't even remember the original, hurt that happened. It'll be what you've done to yourself and how that's accumulating and putting a pattern kind of burned into you. And that's not good. You don't want that, all right? It's really good that you're only 25 and you're willing to change this now. That would be very positive. You absolutely can change the course of your life. And people do it at any age, just saying. But you have the opportunity to not have more relationships like this, and I'm happy for you with that. So tip number 1, in any kind of new relationship or uncertain relationship, or somebody's had no contact and they treated you terribly and they come back, one workaround you can do. Now, your attachment wound is going to say, I'm going to take everything I get. If sex is a possibility, I'm doing that. I'm just running into the fire here. I'm just going to get everything I can, and then hope love comes. But that's trauma-driven thinking. It makes sense for a trauma brain, but it's very unstrategic. So if a guy is interested in you, you running towards sex, especially after you've been mistreated, actually cues him. And this is true for people of any gender, like you cue another person. I don't value myself. You can do whatever you want with me. You can treat me bad and I will just run towards you and sleep with you. And I know you feel shame about that, and I'm not saying this to shame you. I want you to not feel ashamed about this. I just want you to forgive yourself because you have trauma. You're just like everybody with trauma. And then I want you to adopt a strategy, a set of workarounds that put guardrails on that behavior so that you don't self-sabotage like that. Because I don't think there was any hope for this guy very early on. But when you meet somebody again who you're really interested in, you treating yourself with self-respect, going slow, and if they treat you badly, getting out, that's everything. If you get out, that gets you out, and now you're not in a terrible relationship and you're free to try again with somebody else. But let's say someone was rude to you or inconsiderate towards you. You creating distance in response to that, which is healthy, appropriate, is a signal to them, oh wait, this is a self-respecting person. This person has boundaries. I better get on my toes. And so a lot of people are not terrible people necessarily. I don't really know about this guy you dated, but a lot of people walk around and they're just following attraction, and they're attracted to people who have a level of mental health and self-respect that they value. And so it's important to have respect, not just for yourself, even though for yourself is the number one reason, but also just consider how people see you when they meet you. So strategic. Sometimes you act as if you have boundaries, even though you don't honestly have them yet. You just want to call the guy. You want to keep calling the guy who's not calling you and chasing him and sleeping with him when he finally gives you an evening. You want to do it, but you have to be strategic sometimes and just make yourself not, because intellectually you know that that's going to bring you down. It's going to cause him to disrespect you. It's going to get you entangled in a terrible situation again. You just have everything to lose by that. So we use guardrails. And it's the same way that somebody who maybe had problems with drinking is going to maybe not hang out in bars anymore, at least for a while until their sobriety is really easy for them. And they're not going to when I stopped smoking, I didn't want to hang out with other people who smoked. I just couldn't do that for several years because I knew if I was around, I would just make that self-destructive decision if it was there for me. So I did a couple of changes. I didn't drink alcohol. I didn't hang out with other people who smoked. And I did this for 8 years. It's a long time. And I think when I first quit smoking, I thought that I would find that impossible to even do a week, but I just did it one day at a time. And then I made similar changes around how I did dating. And it really didn't take long once I made a decision to behave as a self-respecting person in dating, even during moments of crisis when I was just I don't care, I'm just so sick of being alone. I just gonna run right into the fire. And I stopped running into fires. And it turned out, so quickly did it change the outcome. So I really would like you to look at that. If you want to learn the techniques of how I did it, I teach it in my dating course. The dating course is linked below every video I make. You can go check it out if you want. It's an online course. And then I provide coaching around that as well. So then you said, this hooking up experience, which I thought would turn into a relationship, went on for a year. And with that being said, I never got to meet his friends. He'd tell me about the parties he went to, but I was never invited. He kept my existence secret from his world, and that hurt me very much. But I coped because I thought I would lose him if I pushed for anything serious. Emmy, I just want to say, like, you could have written all that about your dad when you were a kid, that you didn't get to be in his life. He just came when he just, needed a little something. Your dad just needed a job. And you put up with it because you thought you would lose him altogether. And that's what trauma-driven thinking does. It stays stuck in that. When you are a kid, like, that will be all the parent love you're going to get. And you take what you can get and you learn to do whatever mental tricks you have to do to just live with it and accept it and feel loved by it and spin it up in your mind as like real love. When you're dating, the job is to stop doing that. Like, that was your coping mechanism. Now your job is to stop doing that, stop crap fitting, stop fitting yourself to crappy treatment, and wake up and look what's happening. If you have already lost him, a guy who doesn't even invite you to his birthday, he's not with you. You've already lost him. And trauma thinking goes, well, I better just hold on to this because it's all I'm going to get. But you know what? You're a 25-year-old woman. There are going to be so many chances if you are a 25-year-old woman who treats herself with love and self-respect. That's what it is, and has boundaries. So many new possibilities will open up before you. So I know you know that that's your trauma talking that goes, I have to hold on. I should put up with this. I should never complain that I'm being treated as dirt here. I know you know, and I know it's really hard to change. But here's what you can do. Okay, so when he didn't call you and he didn't reply and you called him, I know you know this, but don't call. You're basically just signing up. You're basically just sending a message saying, please disrespect me. I'm in a bad place. I have limerence. And limerence, for somebody who's not into you, feels like stalking. It's really uncomfortable. It never leads to love. It's pretty awful. And you may have had people do it to you before, and I want you to think about what it's like. So the thing about limerence is, you tend to hide it. Like, when you're in it, you tend to hide it from people, because even when your friends hear about it, they're like, oh my God, stop. What are you doing? No, this feels weird. It's very uncomfortable for people because it's coming from a really distorted place. It scares people, that you're doing that. So that's part of why healing limerence means having at least one person that you're totally honest with about what's going on, and allowing them to keep bringing you back and saying, yeah, I remember when you did that like last month too. And then, right, that he told you not to call him and he's not into you, right? And you keep having to be told, and not just you, everybody who gets limerent. That's how healing begins. You open up to reality and you quit hiding it like your secret stash of escape fantasy. Like, it's a fantasy, and it's basically like a drug. It's like a little thing you're taking a hit off of to cope with life and how scary it is. But I'm telling you, you're ready. You're ready to stop using a fantasy to get yourself through the day. It's now officially causing you more pain than it's giving you relief. And it's blocking you from finding love. And I want you to find love. I want you to have that. And trust me, this is the path. Limerent relationships, this is what you do. You cut off all contact forever. Some people will require an explanation. Not this guy. He doesn't want to hear from you anymore. All right? And you saw on Instagram he was with somebody else. And he likes them enough that he doesn't even want you to be calling. So that's your job, is to take this. Now I wanted to set something straight for you. You said it hurt that this woman looked like you because it meant that your personality is the issue. And you know what? We don't know that. Your personality might be exquisite. It could have been perfectly perfect. The thing that is the number one barrier here is the way you're treating yourself with disrespect. You're a woman who allows herself to be the side chick. I hate that word, actually. I'm sorry I'm saying it, but let's just say it for what it is. It's a horrible role to play. And side chick doesn't get loved. Side chick doesn't get respected. And there are certain people who will use such a person for sex, and they will go to any lengths to keep that person compartmentalized out of their life. So it's not your personality. It's that your trauma wound was making it clear. I don't know, maybe your personality, but I don't see any personality problem. It's that your trauma wound was making you behave irrationally and accept bad treatment. And you were signaling to him that you were a person without worth. Of course you have worth. You were just acting like somebody who didn't. But forget that guy. He cheats. We don't even want him anymore, okay? All right, so you felt terrible and you tried to message him several times. And it's embarrassing. Yep, I know. We all know it's embarrassing being that person. And now it's been 7 months and you're still thinking about him, and that's what we do. But you may have seen me tell other people this, and a lot of people will not tell you this. But at a certain point, when you can't stop thinking about somebody and you know that you must, and you know that it's best for you, here's what you do. Every time you catch yourself doing it, you make yourself stop. And you never, ever talk about them to other people. Because that's what your limerent urge wants to do. It wants to tell stories. And I used to have this therapist. I just went for years, and I'm just like, and then I had this dream about him, and she'd be like, oh, well, why don't you draw a picture of that? Or let's draw that in the sand, how you feel about that. And I mean, she would have talked to me forever about this. It was finally when my friend who showed me my daily practice techniques, and which, by the way, anybody who wants to learn them, they really help get that excess emotion kind of grounded again. She taught me these techniques, and she was just like, stop talking about it, stop thinking about it. If you have anything to say about this obsession you have, put it on paper in these techniques and read it to me, but I don't want to hear you talking about it. I was like, oh, she's so mean. Oh, it was the most loving thing anybody ever did. So she would only hear about it if she was hearing me read what I wrote, which was these techniques to get free of these fearful, resentful thoughts that I need to be with this person, I'll only be happy, which was irrational. It was totally irrational. So your therapist says it's a childhood loop of waiting for your dad to return. That much is true, but I would just say, you know, I know you still have a relationship with your therapist, so I don't want to mess with anything they're telling you, but my 2 cents is, okay, established, no need to talk about that anymore, all right? You know why you're this way, and the reason it's important to know that is to see that there's a rhyme and reason, and to know it's not your fault, honey, okay? It's not your fault you got like this. But now, this guy, Noah, your dad, none of them, they are no help to you at all. They are toxic influences, and maybe you'll have a relationship with your dad at some point. But all your healing is going to be about you getting in touch with what's going on. And when you start having those thoughts about the ex, you can just say, I'm trying to run away from something. Sit down with your pen and paper and begin to use your techniques to just get real about what is it that's causing you to get scared or angry here. And that's what my techniques do. Anybody wanting to try them, I recommend you can learn it in less than an hour, but use the specific techniques, because if you don't use the technique as taught, it can make you feel more sad, more angry, more scared. So this is a way to get free of the feelings, to get a vacation from them. And you'll find that sometimes the hard feelings come back, but they're a little bit less complicated now. They're a little bit more actionable now. So that can be really helpful. So you're scared, your self-esteem is down, you're afraid you're going to be alone forever. I'm so glad you see that. That's like everybody's core fear with CPTSD, that, you know, if we don't heal, that's what's going to happen. And there's some truth in that, where if we keep pushing away real love, that's what can happen. So it's time, Emmy, it's time. It's your time to heal, and I'm happy for you. And it's not confusing how to cut this guy out of your life. No contact. Block everything. If you catch yourself thinking about it, stop. Don't talk about him. All right? If your therapist indulges you in talking about it, consider talking to your therapist about what I said and show them this video about why it's helpful to just quit talking about it. There's nothing more to be learned about it. Bring all the talking into how are you going to make your life fulfilling for you today? How are you going to deal with your CPTSD triggers when little things come up and make you feel abandoned? How are you going to deal with it when you feel attracted to somebody? Because you're saying you have this fear of men in general, but you know what? I realize you've been treated badly by men, but you do not have to continue to be treated badly by men. And the person who's going to do that is it's not a magic man who's going to come in and transform that. It's you setting your boundaries in the way I'm describing. All right? You with boundaries. You're going to have a great deal of control over the men that enter your life. There's a stereotype around codependence that it's something that kind of passively just happens to people who are in the lives of people who are selfish or narcissistic or addicted or energy vampires of some kind or another. And the belief is that they just take from codependence, and codependent people just let it happen. But I've noticed that codependent behavior, the role that a codependent person plays, is anything but passive. Like most people who went through abuse and neglect as a kid, I have some codependent tendencies, not all the time, not in every relationship, but sometimes. little ways and occasionally big ways, have really been incredibly damaging. And what I've noticed is that the stereotype that codependent people just give too much and are taken advantage of, it just doesn't really describe it. It's more like a codependent person puts their energy into another person, like forces it, injects themselves into fixing or helping or just generally moving the center of their lives into another person's life. And the reason they do it, as I see it, is to set up that other person to feed them the energy that their codependent tendencies crave. It doesn't always work, but the goal of all that focus on someone, just focus on someone else, is to get something from them. A feeling, something they are missing in themselves, whether it's security, feeling seen, heard, validated, a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. These are all things that they ought to be finding and creating themselves. But with codependent behavior, they're effectively stealing these things from another person. They're latching onto them and trying to then suck something back out. So I've been talking a lot about energy vampires, and some people just directly try to stir up a bunch of energy and then take it. It could be people who stir up romantic energy and then, get to enjoy that flood of romantic energy and then they run away. But with codependence, I think it's similar, actually. It's where you go in and put your energy into somebody else and try to make them change, because doing that gives you energy. So it's the same sort of thing. And it is like a theft. Romantic shoplifting is what I call it. So I realize this is a kind of apocryphal view of codependence, but that's how I experience it when codependents try to attach their hooks to me, to people please me, or to get my approval. And I think this view might be helpful to know as I read a letter I received this week from a woman I'll call Chloe. All right, she writes, "Hi Anna, your videos on isolation, limerence, and abandonment are striking a very relevant nerve in my life, and I have applied them in order to heal my dysfunctional and usually non-existent romantic life. It's improved it somewhat, but I'm still stuck in this loop that I just recently identified with the help of a friend. I find myself attracted to unavailable people, which is very common for CPTSD, I know. But when a person who is available and present and listens to me and asks about me and generally displays good partner characteristics, shows interest in me, my instinctive action is to make them into a friend. Attraction doesn't even register in my brain." Circling here, interesting things I want to come back to. I'm going to read all the way through this letter. We'll come back and go through again, and I will then try to help you, Chloe, to see what's happening here. All right. So attraction doesn't even register in my brain. I immediately jump to friend zoning people who are appropriate. I also must add that by them showing interest in me, it makes my romantic attraction falter. I grew up with loving and providing and selfless parents. But my father was and still is an emotionally unavailable workaholic, and my mother is an enabler, codependent, people pleaser. I love them, but I was never heard, seen, or understood growing up. There is a lot of shame within me that originates from this point. The type of person I go for tends to be someone who doesn't listen to me and who only really talks about themselves, which is what my father did and does. But they are always intelligent and can hold an engaging conversation. I don't have many people like this in my life. I get attached almost immediately, not exclusively to men with these traits, but when they do act in this way, I completely bulldoze my needs and listen to them in adoration. I ask lots and lots of questions about every story, opinion, make myself overly available for them, bend over backwards, making their life easier. But most destructively, dedicate all my thinking time toward them and daydreaming of a future where we're together. It's particularly in their absence where I fantasize and desperately wait for them. Around November, I met a friend of a guy I also had this experience with, but it never developed, who I connected with. We had a long conversation and he drove me home. He asked to come up and I said no. The following day, I cooked a lot of vegetarian food. He's veg. And he was in the area, so I offered him a takeaway box. He tried to come to my house again, but I said no, and we ended up having a 3-hour deep conversation, mostly about him, where he became very vulnerable, and I was hooked. After our first date, we had sex and then proceeded to discard me, short replies, making excuses to not meet, etc. This was on the more extreme side, but the pattern I've found is that men who are not as available are placed on pedestals. On the flip side, when someone shows me interest, it works for the first date, but I begin resenting them after that. Quick example, I met an intelligent and kind man who displayed a lot of interest in me. We had an incredible first date, but after I left, I had a foul taste in my mouth about him. He irritated me every time he tried to initiate something or say anything remotely flirty, but I really enjoyed talking to him. Ultimately, I found myself treating him like a friend and becoming severely avoidant every time he tried to push towards something more romantic, albeit very respectfully. I very quickly lost attraction and interest toward him and discarded him in a very regrettable way and without integrity. On the lesser side, my now best male friend, who I maintain a platonic and emotionally enriching intimate friendship with, was initially someone I pursued. I really want nothing more than a relationship. It preoccupies my mind and is the one wish I make when I get an opportunity. It really bogs me why I cannot seem to enter one and why I constantly sabotage myself. I think it's also worth adding that my most recent friendships have been very similar, and in which the friends I felt most comfortable with were controlling and revolving primarily around them. A lot of them have discarded me in the past year. My question is this: why do I instinctively wish to make a good, healthy, romantic candidate into a friend? Why, in the face of every bit of logic, do I keep abandoning myself when a man who is self-absorbed and or unavailable enters my life? I believe I'm a smart person and I absorb a lot of wisdom from you and my therapist and other healers, but this pattern keeps on happening and it really burns. And then what practical steps can I take to lift the veil of friendship, even if I've lost interest in them, for being available? Any advice or tough love is appreciated. Okay, Chloe, I gotcha. All right, let's go through and I'll tell you what I heard. I think this is kind of a challenging case. I think this is a tough one. So first of all, when you describe your family, this is so interesting, okay? You said that you grew up with a loving and providing and selfless parents, but your father was and still is emotionally unavailable workaholic, which is not loving or providing or selfless, okay? And your mother is an enabler, codependent people pleaser, also not loving, not selfless. You know, that's pretty disordered, and it leads to a person like you not feeling heard and seen. And you know, I have a theory about that. There may be research about this, but you know how mirror neurons are necessary to start learning to have empathy and to read other people. And if a baby is neglected by their parent, they don't get that reflection of, like, you know, faces, eyes, the parent imitates the noises the baby makes. That's how our brains develop. And I think when we're seen and heard as babies and probably a little older, that's also how we develop a sense of self. We develop a sense of self. And so my instinct about you, Chloe, is that you have a delay. I call it a developmental delay. That's not really the word for it, but it is, where your sense of self is very late in arriving. And that's what's missing here. And that's why you're trying to borrow other people's selves, that feels like that thing that's missing in you. That's my theory for you. So let me tell you why I think so. We'll keep going. All right. The person you go for tends to be someone who doesn't listen to you and only really talks about themselves, which is what your father did and does. And I know, you know, we have this kind of simplistic idea that we're trying to match what happened when we were kids. Maybe, or maybe there really is like something neurologically nourishing for you when somebody does that, that you can see somebody being very in touch with themselves. And that feels good for you to be around because you haven't yet got it for yourself. That they have sort of an energy, they're demonstrating for you something, and immediately your idea of yourself can kind of leap into that, and you can see how you would be if you develop that. So that's my hunch about you, is that your spirit is crying for you to have that in yourself, where you're very in touch with yourself. You know who you are. You hear yourself. You see yourself. And because you're visible and you're sort of like fully manifested like that, other people can see and hear you too. What's the word? Materialize. To materialize who you really are. To really come in your body, in the person that people encounter, that you are there. That's what I'm hearing. So you get attached almost immediately. And not exclusively to men with these traits, but when they do, you completely bulldoze your own needs and listen to them in adoration. And you ask lots and lots of questions about every story and opinion. And I'm just wondering, I've known people who did this and I really didn't like it. And somebody who I think had similar traits of what you're talking about. I had a friend like that
who would always ask me questions. And I assumed, you helped me to see that it might be something different than what I assumed. I assumed it was because she thought that that's how you be a good conversationalist. But that's actually, like for me, I get dysregulated. If I get peppered with questions, I absolutely hate it. I shut down. I don't like it. I like a normal amount of questions. I like an exchange and a give and take. But I don't like it when somebody keeps asking me questions because they think that's going to help. But I think in the case of this friend I'm thinking of, yeah, they had a lot of trouble with narcissists and self-centered people. And that was their way of relating to people they liked and admired, was to go ahead and put them up on a pedestal and make it all about them. And I'm just wondering, like, is it possible that the people who you're attracted to, I don't know, you don't think so, so probably not. I defer to you. But is it possible they're actually not that self-centered? It's just that you're causing the conversation to be empty of anything about you, if you're just driving it. And, you know, like Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, pointed out almost 100 years ago, everybody loves to be asked about themselves. And I've talked about it in a video here, but once my husband and I did an experiment. We went to a party. We were anxious about this party. I didn't really want to go. We said, let's see, what can we learn something at this party? So we decided we would do an experiment. We would not talk about ourselves unless forced to. We would only ask people about themselves. And we went to like a 3-hour party where literally no one ever asked us a question about ourselves. They talked about themselves. What was interesting is at the end of it, they were like, oh, we should hang out sometime. And it was funny because I was sort of just like, wow, those people like really never asked about myself. But I had doubts like, should I be talking more about myself? And I don't really have a problem with that. Obviously, on this channel, I talk easily about myself and I could easily do it too much. But just like when I try to gauge like how right is it to like always let somebody talk about themselves, I don't think it's right. I think it's manipulative. It's like trying to make somebody like you, right? So really showing up honestly is going to be a give and take that's going to be influenced by how extroverted or introverted or expressive people are or anxious. You know, personality and circumstances will influence it, but a good relationship, people will just sort of naturally reveal who they are and be interested in each other. And you haven't had that yet. It's always one way or the other. You know what else I want to say, Chloe? I just think that you are attracted to people who are full of themselves like that, full of themselves. And I want to put that in a positive way. And I think that that's not necessarily like a terrible thing. It's just that it's way out of balance without you showing up. It's okay. You know, these guys that you're talking about who, you know, they like you and it turns you off. Well, you're just not attracted to them. And here's the thing. You could go on dates with 100 people and not be attracted to any of them. That's normal and okay. It's okay. It only takes one for lightning to strike for somebody that you really would like to be with, and it's mutual and it works out. So most of the people that you hang out with in a dating way, they're just not going to be the one. So don't even worry. I'm going to just give you a little validation. Attracted, not attracted. And you like a certain type of guy. Maybe it's like more of an alpha type guy. You know, maybe that's what it is. It's not really some big sick thing. It's just you like alpha guys and you have this misunderstanding that you need to dance around and people please them to get them to talk about themselves, and you don't feel like you're interesting enough or good enough to be talking to. And that's how you're kind of sabotaging. I think the problem here might not be as global as you think it is. You'll be the one to decide, of course. So you also say that a negative side of when you sort of put a guy on a pedestal is you dedicate all this thinking time towards them and daydreaming of a future where you're together. And it's particularly when they're not around that you do that. Well, that's how it works. A little bit of limerence there. And again, I'm not going to say that that's totally crazy or sick. If you like somebody, you know, you're going to fantasize a little bit about them and think about the future. A little bit of that is fine. And of course you do it when they're not around, because when they are around, you're actually confronted with the real person. And the real person is flawed and human and, you know, gets in the way and interrupts and whatever it is. You know, it's harder to be limerent when a real person is right there in your midst. But many of us are, you know, hanging out and being just friends with people that we pine for or whatever. That's possible. But so I hear you. It goes a little too far. You fantasize and desperately wait for them. So the pedestal, the waiting, you know, you are describing a pattern. You're describing a pattern. And what I've noticed is that any kind of thing where we're putting people on pedestals and getting limerent about them, it's a known pattern that people have. It comes back into focus when you begin to bring your life into focus and richness. So I'm guessing you didn't tell me much about your life, but there it is. You didn't tell me, like, what do you do? How old are you? You didn't even tell me about yourself. So I don't really know. I can just tell you need more fun, and you need more fun that you have independently of whether some guy is around. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So you met another guy and he liked you and he wanted to come up and you weren't into it. I thought it was interesting that this guy liked you and he drove you home and he came up, and the next day you cooked him food and offered to bring it to him. So I haven't gone on a date in a long time, but when I did date, I would not have done that unless I was absolutely really into somebody. So I think it's interesting that you weren't into him and you did that thing. I think when you're not into somebody, like cooking them, saying, I don't want to sleep with you, and then the very next day cooking something for them and bringing it to them in a takeout box, it's kind of codependent. It just feels that way to me. It's a little too much. So I think that's interesting. So that's your strategy to try to have relationships with people, is like to overdo for them, to be very nice, to listen to them. That's your strategy. You're just still, working on developing. Is who you are enough? Is it enough to just let some guy call you when he feels like calling you, if he'd like to see you again, and then show up and not feel like you have to cook for him or anything? That's, you'd barely even know him, but yeah. So then after that, the next day, you guys got together, had sex, and then he got weirded out and he discarded you. And he stopped, short replies. So you didn't describe that very fully, but I'm just guessing if you liked him enough to have sex with him, I think you might have done the thing where you were just like bombarding him with questions and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? When you're not you and you're trying to take your energy and push it into somebody else's mind, it is not attractive. To a healthy person, that's going to be like off-putting. So I think, you kind of rushed in there with him and it pushed him away. And I think you're aware of that. I think if you had been a little bit like more pace measured about it, he did like you. Maybe that was going to happen. But you know what? If anybody really, really likes you, this sort of shenanigans, it doesn't really get in the way. So don't worry. You're just dating. It's going to constantly just collapse and turn into nothing because you haven't met the one yet. So don't worry. Don't worry. Have patience. On the flip side, someone shows interest and you begin resenting them after that. I know what that's like. And it's a symptom that you're not yet emotionally available. You can grow into someone who's emotionally available. One thing you can do is to stop hanging out with guys you're not interested in. If there's a non-mutual attraction there, don't hang out. I know it's radical, but if you want to become emotionally available, you get out of those like halfway relationships, because what they do is they suck your availability out of you. I'm all about like energy sucks this week. You lose that beautiful radiant energy that's attractive to somebody who might want a serious relationship with you when you're kind of just like leaking all your energy into all these quasi relationships. I like him, he doesn't like me, he likes me, I don't like him. It drains you. It drains you and keeps you from letting your cab light shine. Your cab light, that's the phrase for, like a taxi cab. The light comes on when it's available. And you know how that happens sometimes? Like sometimes you want to be dating and nothing happens. And then one day, boom, something happens and everybody's asking you out, or at least one person is. I never was in an everybody situation, but it begins to happen and it's a little mysterious why it does. But that's part of it because your emotional availability is sort of together right there. And people feel that. We can say anything we want. We can ask them questions and pretend that we're, so obsequious and listening to them and everything. But people feel you. And they feel if they can feel desperation, they can feel resentment, they feel it. So no matter what you're saying and how you're acting, that your vibe is just communicating where you're coming from. The only people who can't feel are people who are like really intoxicated or very, very out of touch with their feelings. And I think that's one reason why people with CPTSD who are functionally not emotionally available right now do end up with these broken people so often. I know I did. And I think that's why. I wasn't trying to recreate my childhood. It's just that somebody who was high was the only person who wanted to be around my difficult, unavailable, hedgy, prickly personality. I didn't really want to be there. And they didn't mind. So that worked for me until it didn't, until I really, grew into a place where I really wanted to get married. I wanted to settle down, and I wanted somebody who really loved me and who was going to stay forever. And there was a lot I had to change for that. So you turn them into a friend, you friend zone them. But I don't think there's anything you can do about that. I don't. I think we don't always have control over who we're attracted to or who we fall in love with. I think that the guys who are attractive to you, I think with a little bit of healing, you can meet halfway with them a little better. I think that's how it's going to happen for you. So you say you want nothing more than a relationship. It preoccupies your mind. And it's always what you think about when you think, can I make a wish? Like what, blowing out the candles? Oh, I wish I would have a relationship. I get that. Yeah, so it's your heart's desire. So that's good. You have this pattern with friends too. And that's what's great to know. So you have this thing where you feel like you have to do that. You learned it growing up. You were growing up with parents who couldn't hear you or see you. You didn't get a chance to clarify your own being to yourself. But now you're a grown-up, and now it's time to do that. So here's how I have had some luck with that. I had I had chunks of a year, 2 years between relationships. And a couple of them in particular were super developmental for me, where I learned to spend time by myself doing things I loved, really, really enjoying my life without having a guy in it. And, I would have my days when I'd be like, oh, I feel so inadequate because I don't have a relationship and everyone else does, which of course they don't. But I discovered stuff that I really love doing. And that was a lot of what was sad for me about not being with somebody is that, I wanted to be able to go to museums. I wanted to be able to go hiking and camping. Do you know what? I've gone camping by myself and it was fabulous. It was really fun. And I've traveled, I've gone to all kinds of cities by myself. And what's fun about that is when you don't have a companion with you, you end up interacting with people there. I totally stayed safe. I know how to do that. I was never in any kind of risk or anything. But I went around to cities and I would end up having conversations on the subway or in a meeting or, I just found people and I was so much more ready to engage and meet people. And this made me interesting. The second thing that made me interesting was I started to read challenging books. And lately I haven't had time for that, and I regret it, because at the times in my life when I've read challenging books, whatever that is for you, I was reading some stuff about philosophy, Aquinas for Beginners, and a book called After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. They're both really dense. The other one, it says it's for beginners, but it's really dense, like Thomas Aquinas. It was written a long time ago. It's super deep, and it was hard to understand. But these are incredible books, and just even reading them, even the first day that I began reading them, things would change. My imagination opened up. And when I would have a conversation with people, I had something other than me to talk about. I could talk about, this is what a good conversation is. It's not all about me or all about you. We talk about an idea. We talk about a goal. There are things bigger than both of us that are really, really deep and wonderful to talk about. And that's how people are drawn out of themselves. Yes, we talk about ourselves and self-disclose and ask questions, but that's just part of it. A relationship is built from a common goal or ideal, or beginning with ideas that you talk about. So I really encourage you to do that. And I don't know if you read news. News is really complicated. That used to be something I thought was really important, but the thing is it's so negative now that I think that bonding with people over negative feelings about stuff, it's not really the best basis. You can do that later. So bonding over things that you're really, really interested about, that you feel excited and good about, or ideas that you're reading about or investigating, that will completely change the character of the conversations that you have around you. And you will begin to grow confidence that you are somebody worth talking to. The third thing I would suggest to you is to be somebody who meditates. Maybe you already do, but meditation, if you take it seriously, will deepen you. It will start to bring you into your full self. And I've meditated now since 1994. And I've had periods where I didn't and I just blew it off. But it's been really helpful on so many levels. As you may know, I teach this thing called the Daily Practice. It's a free course. I think now, hundreds of thousands of people have taken it. And it's delightful. People all over the world are doing it. It's a very simple set of techniques. One is writing your fears and resentments. And it's specific. You should look it up in the course before you try this. But it's a way to get free of those thoughts, anxious, angry thoughts. And that's a lot of what drives unhappy relationship behavior, is fearful, anxious thoughts, angry thoughts. And then sitting down in a very simple meditation and just resting. Now, if you have CPTSD, and it sounds like you might, you may get very dysregulated. You have a hard time being your grounded self, especially under stress. And you know what's stressful is being around someone you're attracted to. So to be able to stay yourself and stay grounded and become somebody that, like, you're palpable in the room to somebody talking to you, you might want to try these techniques. There's always a link below. There's a link down there. It says free tools. And on my website, Crappy Childhood Fairy, free tools. And there's stuff there that anybody can sign up for free. So you might want to try that. Your mission, Chloe, if you choose to accept it, is to become more fully yourself. Don't worry about the guys right now. Like, take a pause on that. And one reason I say take a pause is because the thing that you do where you discard people is hurting them. And so the thing that's happening to you, you're turning around and doing to other people. I don't want you to have either of those experiences. And it's just bad karma to be hurting other people. So take a year or something. Take some time to try these new things of meditating, getting to know yourself, read challenging books, go learn to do things by yourself that enrich you and give you joy. And you will find the next time you're with a guy you're attracted to that your real self is starting to shine through in a very nice way.
If love were food, some of us grew up on little more than a little bite of bread and a bowl of old soup each day. And if a kid were starved nutritionally like that, you'd see it for what it is. It's abuse. It would stunt their growth. They might not be able to run or climb or learn. They might get sick or lose their hair. It would show. Now, people outside the family notice this kind of thing, and they care and they do something. So when you were starved for love and attention as a kid, did something similar happen to you emotionally, psychologically, neurologically? Because that's what's going on. Neglect causes changes that cause illness and learning problems and connection problems with other people. And what I want to talk about today is how neglect can cause real devastating problems, detecting who is safe and who is dangerous, who has your best interests at heart, and who is using you. And I want to talk about the price that you might be paying if that's happening for you and you're not yet healing from it, because you can. It's really important that you heal, and I'm here to tell you there is hope. So I got a letter this week from someone I'll call Nora, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I have CPTSD as well as ADHD. My parents were immature, emotionally unavailable, and my dad drank a lot. So I'm also a grown child of an alcoholic. Right now, I'm on medication and trying to put my life back together. For almost 4 years now, I've been dating a guy, let's call him Matt. When I met him online, his pictures and description were great. He seemed to be a mature, intelligent, strong guy. We met and we fell in love. In fact, I felt love for the first time in my life. Our goals seemed to be the same, a long-term relationship." I'm circling that because, I'm going to come back through this letter after we read it through one time and talk about what you said here. But after a short time, Matt's behavior showed some red flags. He didn't have much time for me as he worked almost 24/7. We met only once a week for several hours. We never went on vacation. We never spent Christmas together and never even spent a whole night together. All this, he tells me, is because he is worn out by the job. He says he has severe anxiety and he can't do all those things with me now, but one day, when he gets proper rest, he will. Okay, when I first understood the situation, it was shocking. I had never been with a man who had so many limitations. I knew deep in my gut that this situation wasn't good for me. But of course, I thought that I could handle this. And since I felt I found my true love, it was worth fighting for. But here we are, almost 4 years later. Not much has changed. We don't live together. We meet once or twice a week. We never spend whole nights together. And my man shows more and more signs of his PTSD and other problems. He claims he loves me. I am the woman of his life, and soon everything will change. He went to psychotherapy yesterday. He knows that there is something really wrong with him. A year or two ago, I would have considered the fact he went to a therapist a dream come true. But now it just isn't. I guess I'm just worn out by the relationship, especially by waiting for him to get his shit together and finally be with me like a normal couple. I wanted to be with him from the beginning, to live with him, to go on trips, to spend holidays together. I didn't get any of these, and I really don't know if I ever will. During the 4 years I've been seeing Matt, I've had a lot of hard things happen. First, I lost the job I loved. I was a television reporter. It took me a long time to get another job, but I didn't have the same money and prestige. I found out my parents had to move to another apartment because they were not paying their rent. Then 3 years ago, my father died. Then a nephew took his own life. I had to change my job 2 months ago for another job I don't really like that much and that doesn't pay enough to support myself. I'm working from home, so I don't have anybody to talk to. I don't have any friends. I'm really depressed and scared. I feel too weak at this point to even think about living with Matt anymore. I don't have the energy to execute this great project called living together and all the steps involved, like finding a proper place, moving from my place, arranging all our things and decorating. I'm afraid we couldn't even manage to live together since we both have CPTSD and other problems like depression and anxiety. I feel like I'm not a good partner now because I think only about myself and how miserable I feel. I really don't know what to do. Maybe you can help me. I'd be really grateful if you would. Yours sincerely, Nora. Poor Nora. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I hope you see how closely your experience right now is matching what you went through as a kid. Can't change the past, but Nora, we can help you change your life right now. And there's some stuff here that I think having an outside perspective is going to be really helpful for you. All right, so let's go through the letter. All right, you have CPTSD and ADHD, totally understandable. Parents were immature, emotionally unavailable. Sounds like somebody who's in your life now, right? And your dad drank a lot, so you're an adult child of an alcoholic. I know how that is. Right now, I'm on medication and trying to put my life back together. So what you said right there set the whole thing up, that your life has fallen apart. And you told us later how, so we'll get to that. For almost 4 years now, you're dating Matt. Met him online. He had his description was great. He seemed mature, intelligent, strong. Met, fell in love, felt love for the first time in your life. This is all great. This is growth, right? And your goals seem the same, a long-term relationship. All right, first, I'm just going to ask you about that. Are you not looking to get married? And I ask you because you'll hear me say this in a lot of videos. Almost never when I'm coaching somebody who has CPTSD are they able to say that what they want is marriage. And so they say something like long-term relationship. Well, that could be a relationship of 3 years. Is that actually what you're aiming for? Or are you hoping for a relationship that you can totally settle down in and live your life and maybe, have a home together? I don't know exactly how old you are or if children are in your future, but to create a family, perhaps to save for your retirement together, to take care of each other through thick and thin, to have friends together, to volunteer together, the things that normal couples do, like you said. That would be more like a marriage, right? And so I just am going to flag that you said a long-term relationship. I think sometimes the first problem that's introduced for people with CPTSD when they end up in a really unfulfilling relationship, which you have, is that they are afraid to claim what they actually want. So you have a long-term relationship. You have one right now. It's gone on 4 years. That's long-term. And it is a relationship, even though it's a thin one. It's thin soup, right? All right. So after a short time, his behavior showed red flags. And that's the great thing about dating when you do it carefully is after a short time, the red flags, if there are any, they're going to appear. But you were already with him, which is totally normal. That's what we do. That's what we do. And he didn't have much time for you as he worked almost 24/7. 24/7? Okay. I'm going to read the rest of this part that you wrote. You met only once a week for some hours. You never went on vacation, never spent Christmas together, never spent a whole night together. All this, he told you, is because he's worn out by his job. He's just so tired. He has severe anxiety, can't do all those things with you. But one day when he gets some rest, he will. Okay, so first, huge red flag here, and you didn't seem to notice it. But this sounds to me like somebody who already is married or living in a relationship. Where is he on Christmas? When does he take a holiday? Where does he sleep? Have you ever been to his house? Have you ever met anybody in his family or any of his close friends? You didn't mention that. And I'm just going to flag that for you to consider as you hear this, because when you put 2 and 2 together here and consider, does he already live with a partner or married to one? Who knows? Perhaps have a child with one. Does it all fit? Does all the information now fit? Now, if you were to tell me, no, I have been to his house, it's not like that, he's really just messed up, I would say he is severely avoidant. And as you've noticed, he's not available for a relationship. He can't even spend the night. That's a level of avoidance. You can call it anxiety or PTSD. Maybe that's what's driving it, but the result is avoidance, inability to have a relationship with you. I think it's great he's going to a therapist, but going to his first therapy appointment is, it's like too little too late, really. I hope he gets better. It could take a long time. These things do. I want to introduce to you the possibility of totally working on yourself as you are and not being in this relationship so that you can be together with somebody who is available, who's available like right now. And when you date and fall in love within a certain amount of time, yes, you can spend whole nights and Christmas and get married and live together and do all that stuff that you want to do. It's funny because sometimes, I know I was in the same boat. You need somebody outside yourself to say, Nora, do you see that you just put a big wall up for you not to get what you want? It's like a wall. It prevents you getting what you want because Matt's not the one who's going to give it to you. And because he's there occupying that boyfriend space in your life, nobody else can get to you either. And the time of your life is passing. I'm going to talk about some other aspects of this that really need your attention. Okay. A year or 2 ago, I would have considered the fact that he went to a therapist a dream come true. Yeah, a year or 2, I think that it could have made a difference. But now it just isn't. I guess I'm worn out by this relationship, especially by waiting for him to get it together and finally be with me like a normal couple. Yeah, you don't have to wait. A healthy relationship does not involve waiting for somebody to get it together so that they can be with you. That's just by nature, that is an unavailable man. That's what it is. And, no blame to you with an alcoholic dad, with emotionally unavailable parents, like that's what we do. You're having normal symptoms of somebody who had a very abnormal, hurtful upbringing. But here we are. You wrote to me. You can heal this. You can heal this. And you're very brave because I know you watch my videos and you know that I really sometimes just say the truth, as hard as it is to hear. But you're blocking out any possibility of getting what you want right now, Nora. And so I'm going to say that to you. Probably you're going to have some tears. I think it's going to come as a relief to just get some validation. Yeah, that's what's going on. And you know what? Sometimes that's what we have to do because intimacy with people is extremely triggering. And if your PTSD is very hard and, out of control, something's got to give. So I'm noticing you had all this problem with employment after you got in this relationship. That's not a good sign for a relationship, but it also suggests that maybe you had like this little bit of bandwidth for dealing with stuff that's stressful. And if your relationship is going to be full of worry and stress and no validation, then you can't really, a job would have to be like a perfectly smooth sailing episode to handle it. But jobs are usually kind of, involve some fear and insecurity and strife and conflict sometimes too. And especially if you were a TV reporter, that's pretty intense and very commendable. And if you did it before, you can do it again, But that's hard, and it sounds like you could only do one hard thing at a time. Consider this, Nora, that in the future, you can be alone and or in a relationship that is nourishing and comforting to you so that when you do scary, brave things professionally, your home life supports you and makes it easier and lifts you up a little bit towards where you're trying to go. You get to have that, okay? You deserve it. All right. You want to go on trips. You want to spend holidays together. You didn't get any of these. You really don't know if you ever will. Okay, I think you got your answer on this guy. I'm just going to say you do have your answer on this guy. With him, you're not. But perhaps with somebody else you will. And by the way, holidays and trips can be wonderful when you're single. And of course, there's going to be some single time. And if the way that your parents were rough, I would bet dollars to donuts that that abandonment is a thing, is a trigger for you. So leaving a relationship is difficult and scary, and you might avoid it and stay in a cruddy situation that's unhappy for you just because leaving anything is so emotionally intense you feel like you're going to break. But you're in the crappy childhood fairy community now. And in fact, if you come do the daily practice and come to the free calls and maybe get a buddy, you're going to have free instant support. And who knows, maybe you're able to be in the membership program too with the group coaching. But if you can just start learning the daily practice. Also, I'm going to suggest to you, I do this to so many people, especially when there's financial hard times, 12-step programs. You have an adult You're an adult child of an alcoholic. Yay, you qualify for adult children of alcoholics in Al-Anon, CODA, and those are great places where you can meet friends who are also working on themselves, who can be a positive influence on you, who can help you have people to hang out with. In fact, people to spend holidays with, people to take trips with, like good friends who make relationships something that would be nice to have, that you can step up to when and if you meet somebody who makes you happy, who brings happiness into your life, who supports you, who helps you take a step up in your life. That step up, all right, one really important sign, I'll give you two really important signs of a relationship of when it's right. One is, how do you feel in that relationship? Like, what happens to your energy? What happens to your energy in that relationship? So you're with this guy who's always complaining that he's tired. Now you're tired. You're worn out. You don't have energy for anything. This is terrible. This is terrible. Energy is your life. And the amount of energy that you have is how much life you have to pursue what makes you happy. So energy is so, so important. Anything that drains you, you want to take a very hard look at it. Because even when it has markers of like, but it's good, but it's great, just check in with how you feel about yourself. Check in with how you feel about what you're doing. Check in with just your energy level, the level of peace that you have. You have all the signs here, like this relationship is draining you, sweetheart. It's not only not giving you the things that you want, but it's taking the life out of you. So I'm going to just kind of shine a light on that problem for you so you can see that for what it is. The other thing that's a sign of a relationship that is good, that we're not seeing here, we're seeing the opposite, is that a good relationship causes you to become a still better version of yourself. You get up, you rise up a little bit because of the relationship. And ideally, your partner will too. That's a sign that you two are good together, is that you both take a step up. You both become better people. You know, whether that's for you, continuing in your career and maybe moving up towards things that are satisfying, that use your talents and gifts, that contribute something to the world. You're saying here, you've come down the ladder so far that you can't even support yourself. There it is, okay? This is where I would just draw the line. I would draw the line on this relationship. If you can't support yourself, your dad's gone, but your mom is, has been immature and emotionally unavailable. Chances are it's a big trigger for you. Going home is not a great option for you. You can't move in with this guy. It's time to draw the line and begin to take care of yourself and nourish yourself spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, and to start doing the good things that you need. And you could use a metaphor, mercury poisoning, that somehow you're eating something, some fish. Here where I live, we have a bay, and if you eat fish out of it too much, you could get mercury poisoning. And mercury poisoning will start draining the life out of you and affect you cognitively and, start putting your light out, and it can kill you. So the first step is stop eating the mercury. And that means just time to draw that hard boundary with this guy. And trust me, he's going to understand. He will understand. And you're going to go through withdrawal. After you've been neglected so much in your life, it's really, really hard to end a relationship. I know. So you prepare for it by setting yourself up with nice, good friends to go to, places to go to, someplace that there's a Saturday night get-together is ideal, and a lot of 12-step fellowships have that. If the program that you choose doesn't have it, one thing is open AA meetings. There's generally a lot more Alcoholics Anonymous meetings around, so even if you're not an alcoholic, There are two categories of AA meetings, and one is open, and that means anybody can come if they're interested. They can't necessarily share, but they have a place to go, and afterwards people are generally very friendly to you. I've been to many, many of them. I'm not an alcoholic. Many, 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 many of them. And I've been so helped by being there. And then there's closed AA meetings, and so you can't go to those. But if you look in the schedule, AAs are very good usually about having Saturday night meetings, because that's a vulnerable, weekend nights are a vulnerable time for people. It's a time when many of us feel extra alone and are tempted to go back to the man, or in their case, go back to the bar. So having a really safe, lovely, supportive place to go can be life-changing and give you the strength and support that you need to make this change in your life, to cut off that little bit of contact and love and touch that you have and replace it with something sustainable and good. And as you heal, then this circle of people in your life who love you starts to grow and grow and grow and grow. There's so much to learn. Boy, when you're the kid of an alcoholic and you haven't yet had a full relationship, or you've just had these kind of like breadcrumb relationships, there's so much to learn. And if you can be supported and loved and continually working on stuff on yourself in these environments, then you can learn those lessons nice and fast. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to take forever. That's one thing that some of us have been told is, this is going to take a long time. And it's like, well, maybe. You can start feeling better today. And I always am recommending my daily practice for anybody who needs to start feeling better today. It's a practice. I use it every day, twice a day. I used it this morning. And it just, after 27 years, it's still like, just helps clear the cobwebs when I wake up in the morning, helps me let go of the stress at the end of the day, helps clear my head so I can have a fresh and new perspective, a new idea, and more peace inside. And you'd be very surprised what you can do in life when you have that. So finally, Nora, I wanted to talk about all this, the hard stuff that happened that you had no control over. And this is the loss of your dad and your nephew, and I'm just so sorry. It's strange sometimes how all the bad things cluster together, but I tend to think, because that's happened to me, I've had a few periods in my life when a whole bunch of bad things happened at once. And while it was so painful and disappointing and lonely going through those times, I gotta say that the most growth I ever had was during those times. Sometimes it's the loss that helps us confront the ways that we have been afraid to step forward into our lives and to start to become who we really are. That's what we're doing this for. That's what we're healing, is not just to get the guy, not just to have the vacation or the Christmas, but to become fully ourselves. And that is what's in store for you, Nora. That's what you didn't get to do yet. That's why things just inherently feel unsatisfying. And the more you come into yourself, the more situations that are, unfulfilling and look better on the outside than on the inside will quickly become apparent to you. And you'll have the courage to step back very early in the process and not spend years on them in the future. You can date. And dating is a chance to get to know people and see if they're the one. So I want you to just be so happy, Nora. I want you to have everything you want. What you want is so reasonable and good and fair to have that be your heart's desire. You deserve it. You deserve it. And it will happen naturally for you if you can stop taking the poison of this breadcrumb relationship and change that fundamental pattern of yours to accept emotional neglect. All right? When you grew up with abuse and neglect when you were a kid, it can be really, really hard to form your ideal of what is a good relationship. What kind of person should you even be looking for? And in the absence of that, we can sometimes end up attaching our hopes and dreams onto people who are really not a fit at all and not appropriate. And it can be hard to tell. And that's why we share with each other. And that's why people write letters here. So I wanted to read a letter today from a woman I'll call Kira. And she says, "Thank you so much for your videos, Anna. I'm 42 years old, and I believe I have CPTSD based on my childhood experience of emotional and physical abuse, being born into an immigrant family, and being a woman of color, mostly in white spaces. Consequently, I've had symptoms in adulthood such as pursuing unavailable men, playing small professionally, avoiding attachment, fear of intimacy, fear of authenticity, etc. It's mostly manifested as avoidant attachment, self-reliance, and people-pleasing. All right, just getting my pencil so I can circle things that I want to be sure to talk about when I come back through this letter the second time. But let's read through it the first time. All right, Kira says, 3 years ago I started a meditation practice, partly out of curiosity and partly out of desperation. Suddenly, all my suppressed pain came pouring out of me. I felt grief, rage, sadness, and also new hope. And since then, I've been able to see a lot of my past behaviors and defenses more clearly. I've sought support on many levels and in many ways, and it's been incredibly helpful. I believe that I'm making progress in leaps and bounds, and it feels slow, too. I've never been in a significant relationship as of yet. In my teens and college, I had sexual encounters and situations, but never dated anyone. In my 20s and 30s, I had a bunch of one-night stands and 3 situationships, I like that word. But again, nothing that lasted more than 2 to 6 months, and never anyone I called a boyfriend or partner. In my early 30s, after a particularly devastating and humiliating breakup, I decided I would not get romantically involved again until my insides felt right. Since then, I've worked really hard to abstain from romantic and sexual possibilities because I saw that the person was not a good fit. Most recently, though, a few years ago, I got romantically involved with someone who was not a good fit realistically. He was a decade younger than me. We were on different life paths. He was moving out of town. But he was more emotionally available than anyone else I had been with. I felt like I had to see what would happen, almost like a learning exercise. And it was both a really deepening and really painful experience, especially when he left. Today, I'm again faced with romantic and sexual interest in a couple of people who seem more emotionally stable and capable of the love and partnership I want. Is it just a vibe? Is this magical thinking? I don't have friendships with them, and I don't even know if they're single. One is my therapist and lives 2 hours away. The other also lives 2 hours away in a different town. I've seen them each in person only a handful of times, and I felt a romantic interest. But it is so rare to encounter men that I'm attracted to that might be in the realm of good partnerdom. And because I've been celibate for almost 4 years, I want to make space for my desire and see what happens. Again, like a learning exercise. Though my brain can see ways in which these are likely dead ends, I have a deep urge or compulsion to pursue them both. I want to be direct about my attraction and curiosity about dating. I'm not sure what to do. To be clear, with my therapist, if the attraction were reciprocated, I'd expect to end the therapeutic relationship. My brain sees this as likely more of the same old, and wants me to shut up, sit tight, and get my shit together. But the desire and curiosity inside of me wants to express myself and see what happens. How do I know when to direct time and energy at someone and when to abstain? I'm also concerned I might be a sex and love anorectic, which makes me want to be more open. Yikes, says Kira. Typing that out, I see how unreasonable that is. So she asks, how do I balance patience, self-protection, having higher standards, self-control, along with unhealthy restriction, with living my life with the permission to explore, self-express, have a sex life, make mistakes, even if the prospects do not appear ideal? Also, what do I do with my eroticized feelings of longing and possible fantasy making when they arise? Thank you, Kira. All right. Thank you so much for writing in. I have such a tender spot in my heart for you and what you're going through. What I see, and this is usually pretty evident in the letters, but there's nothing like hearing a little summary of what happened to you when you were a kid and hearing what you're struggling with in relationships now to make it clear what a strong role these traumatic experiences play in shaping what's hard for us. And I feel for you, and yet here we are. Whatever happened to us, we can find a way to heal and to change and to craft our lives into something that gives us happiness. I hear you are in a tough place. This thing where you crave that relationship and you haven't had a serious relationship. You describe yourself as having an avoidant attachment and self-reliant personality, and that you people please. And that is a tough combination. You had a childhood experience of emotional and physical abuse. That is so much to overcome, and I'm so sorry that happened to you. And what you're talking about here are very common symptoms that follow for somebody like that. And you were born into an immigrant family, and you're a woman of color. And I can sure see how those two things with the abuse made it so hard to feel like you belong, to feel accepted, to feel like people get you, or like sometimes like you even get what's going on with them. And that part I relate to. And I know how hard that is. So then you say 3 years ago you started a meditation practice, and you were curious, you were desperate, good reasons to develop a practice and to get into healing. That's why I started to. And suddenly all this suppressed pain came pouring out, and you felt grief, rage, and sadness, and new hope. And I think that is how it works sometimes. So good, kind of, good. Since then, I've been able to see a lot of my past behaviors and defenses more clearly. That's incredible. That's very powerful. That's very noble and holy that you can do that. You've sought support on many levels, and it's been helpful. And you say, I believe I'm making progress in leaps and bounds, and it feels slow. Okay, so good. First, I just want to pat you on the back and hug you and say, good job. Good job doing things to support yourself that have allowed you to progress and to face what's in there, including the stuff that you don't feel great about yourself. Like, that's PhD level self-care. That's very good. All right. So never had a significant relationship yet. That's so hard. I hear you. In your teens and college, you had encounters and situations, but never really dated. In your 20s and 30s, you had some one-night stands and situationships, but nothing that lasted more than 2 to 6 months, and never anyone you could call a partner. That's really significant. That's a big deal. So obviously, big stuff going on there. Somehow in the interaction of your energy and where your outlook, the way you come toward people and who you're picking. I mean, that would be true for anybody, but I can just sort of see that weird sort of discordant vibration going there that kept undermining you. In your early 30s, after a particularly devastating and humiliating breakup, you decided you wouldn't get romantically involved again until things felt right. Okay. But here it is 10 years later. So here you are. Okay, good. Since then, you've worked really hard to abstain from romantic sexual possibilities because you saw that, I guess in most cases, the person wasn't a good fit. And then recently you did get involved with somebody who also wasn't a good fit realistically because they were so much younger, because they were on a different life path, and they were moving out of town. Can I just say, for somebody who's avoidant, that's like a dreamboat, okay? There's like this difference that makes it so it can't really work out. Different life paths, younger, moving out of town, like very soon, imminently it can't work out. So I think for an avoidant person, in a weird way, that is a huge opportunity to like test out, to take your heart for a test drive, because you can, because the thing that is hard for you to deal with just isn't happening. So you say, I felt like I had to see what would happen, almost like a learning exercise. It was both a really deepening and painful experience, especially when he left. Okay. I will validate for you that you can learn from that, but I'm going to suggest to you that you back off of this idea of relationships as experiments. Just because you have been abused and neglected, you have been through so much, you have attachment issues, and I'm going to suggest that we direct you more towards a path of really gentle handling. So relationships are treated as relationships with another person with potential to become the partner that what I'm hearing is that you'd really like to have, somebody who gets you, who loves you, who cares about you, who you can have great sex with, right? And not have to have another humiliating and painful experience or a shallow experience. So I'm going to say it. And you're not the first person with CPTSD. In fact, like almost everybody with CPTSD, I hear you kind of selling yourself short here. But one thing you said in the first paragraph is that you go for unavailable men. You play small professionally, which I think is a very similar thing. Avoidant attachment, self-reliant, people-pleasing. So you didn't say this, but I'm just like imagining this person who stays in the smallest room in the house, who takes up as little space as possible, who tries to have no footprint, walks on eggshells, maybe hides needs, hides what you really need and what you really have to say. that's kind of like the vibe I get here from your letter so far. That woman is very good at being frugal, being no trouble at all for other people, but not so good at getting loved. So just like everything I tell you now is going to be about shifting the energy and letting yourself come forward, front and center, so that you can take up space and express yourself and accept about yourself that yes, you have some rough edges associated with what you went through and you're working on them, and you totally, totally deserve to be loved. Okay? It's not easy when you have CPTSD to just like match up with somebody and it goes really well. And I heard you say a couple of times in this letter, I thought I would just kind of like throw caution to the wind and then see what happens. And kind of when you do that, when you take all the attachment wounds, right? And then you just sort of like leap in and go, well, let's see what happens. Well, pretty much the same thing happens again and again. And I would just point out as kindly as possible, whatever has happened for you, that's what's likely to happen again until you kind of change your energy about it and change your approach and change that core belief you have about yourself that you need to play small romantically, because playing small is exactly what I hear here. So yeah, the guy who was younger, different path, moving out of town, small, that's just like, that's not like the great, relaxing, abundant, safe, nurturing, awesome, comforting, moves your life to a new level relationship, right? And every day that you spend emotionally wrapped up with somebody who's not that, you're not available to somebody who is. And so I don't know what town you live in that everybody's 2 hours away. So let's read this part. Okay. So you got interested in a couple of people recently, and they seem more emotionally stable and capable of love and partnership. And you're wondering, is it just a vibe? Is it magical thinking? Could be. It could be. I don't know, because you don't even know them very well, right? So if you've been avoidant, if you've been playing small, if you're a people pleaser, if you try to be self-reliant and everything, I would just say, respectfully, your judgment might have some little like holes poked in it where you can fit yourself to people who don't really have these things you seek. But you know what's beautiful here? You've named what you think. Emotionally stable and capable of love and partnership. Okay, good. You named it. Name it, claim it. That is what you want. That is what you deserve. And now your job is growing into the person who chooses those people and dates those people. Now here's the challenge. We can notice people who are, stable and cool. But then there's this big getting to know you process to find out, are they actually available? Do they feel that way about you? And that whole process weeds out many, many people. So, meeting somebody great involves putting yourself out there. And putting yourself out there is not always easy for avoidant people or for people with CPTSD in general. But I'm just going to say, good job feeling the feelings, good job dreaming about it, desiring it, asking the question, writing here. This is all like very good progress. Okay, so you don't even know if they're single. Okay, so that's a huge question mark, right? But good, you just notice the vibe in them and then you notice it's attractive. All right, one of them is your therapist and lives 2 hours away. So I don't want to burst your bubble, but that is not a person you even could date even if you both wanted to. So they can't do that. That's like illegal and unethical. They can't do that. And it's totally normal and common for people to develop feelings for their therapists. And occasionally it happens in the other direction too. And in very tiny, rare cases, it goes out of hand and people start having relationships, but that's considered a disaster. We had a letter from somebody who that happened to in her life just a couple of weeks ago. It's a terrible breach of boundaries. So I'm just telling you, yeah, that one is wishful thinking. I don't think you're thinking magically, because I can tell you didn't know that. You knew that you would have to end the therapeutic relationship. But, in most locations, therapists are not even allowed to have relationships. I think sometimes there's like a 2-year cooling off period or something. And even then it's kind of frowned on, because when we go to therapy, we are so very vulnerable. And there's so much opportunity for things to go not very well in those relationships. So I'm just going to tell you flat out, just cross that one off your list. Honor that you felt that for somebody. If you can't stop feeling that way, it might not be the best therapist for you. Because if that kind of attraction is there, it's going to really complicate your ability to be open and real and go where that therapy is trying to go. Okay.
and 2 hours away. 2 hours away, that's a really hard thing. I think it's so interesting that they're both 2 hours away, because that's your just little buffer zone, okay? It's not like impossible that you can date somebody 2 hours away, but interesting that you chose to. I don't know, maybe you live in a very tiny town where there are almost no single men who are even possible for you, but so this other guy 2 hours away, you've only seen him a handful of times. So cool, you feel attraction for him, right? Now, I guess the next order of business is to get a little information. If he is not single, it's like a total no-go zone. If he's in a relationship or dating somebody, how can you find that out artfully? I will leave that to you. But you would need to know that. It would be really rough for all concerned if you were to, flirt with him, try to get something going with him without knowing that. And it's, this happens sometimes. People flirt, they make kind comments, they sort of test the waters. That's one way to find out, but very, very lightly. And the minute you find out that he's not single, just like cut it off. So I will say that the best way to meet somebody who's good partner material is to get to know them. And so when you have attraction before you know somebody, I'm just going to call that physical attraction. It's a physical attraction, and you might have a very good intuition about that. I mean, people who have it together have certain things you can see about them sometimes, kind of, right? So cool. I wouldn't totally invalidate it, but there is no substitute, even for people who don't have CPTSD, for getting to know somebody slowly. And that means talking to them, maybe having a coffee. And if you have taken my dating course, and I hope you will, it's all about this kind of thing. I really recommend that you put yourself on a super slow cycle of getting to know you with people. And I'll get to that when we talk about your feeling of being a little bit impatient about, wanting a sex life again. Okay. So then you said, because I've been celibate for almost 4 years, I want to make space for my desire and see what happens. I had talked about this language before. You can make space for your desire, but I think what you're saying is, I just can't, I don't know, I could be wrong, all right? But what I'm hearing is, this whole thing where I get to know people and I find out the facts about them and I see if they're really good partner material, that's all really hard. It's not something I'm very good at. So what I really want to do is just see, can I just have sex with them and see what happens? But again, that is the part that's magical thinking, that just having sex with somebody would be the way to get to know them. For a person with CPTSD, that's a way to go into a fog. It's a way to get very dysregulated and to have all your old stuff come up and become difficult to date, and to have a lot of difficulty discerning and seeing red flags. So that's why I say, no judgment. That's how practically everybody else gets to date out there. But I suggest you consider a different approach that is very front-loaded with getting to know somebody, beginning with really clear criteria of what would be a good person for you. And I have a feeling that you're just like everybody else who's been through attachment wounds, that's a little bit fuzzy for you. So to really think about what you want and not play small when you name that stuff. Don't say, well, I want somebody who at least, wears shoes or at least is not in jail. Pick something, aim high for what you really want, all right? And that needs to include, based on what you've defined here, that they're good partner material, and then name 20 ways that you know that they're good partner material. Name a bunch of ways, name it. Don't just say that vaguely and try to rely on an intuition about it or a shirt that they wear or something. Name those things and get to know them diligently. You don't have to make a big show about it. It's called dating. And I get that that's not really been something you have experience with, and join the crowd. Culturally, that's something that not everybody has done before, but you can start now. It's not too late. And there really are men who would like to do that, who want to go slow, who want to get to know you, who want to enjoy a meal or a walk or a cup of coffee and get to know you a little bit. And for all of us, when we get together with somebody for a brief get together, it's really good practice. And especially it's really good practice if you have people to talk to, friends who say, how'd your date go? And you go, it was pretty good. He got there 5 minutes late. I was worried that meant he didn't like me, but then he came and he seemed pretty enthusiastic. And, he bought the coffee and I was nervous. I thought maybe I should buy it and I didn't know what to do, but he bought it and that worked out okay. And then we talked a lot and I feel like I talked too much about this. And you get your friends' input and help you interpret reality, because that's what friends do for each other. They help us as people who have been traumatized and have trouble with perception sometimes. We sometimes read in the worst to situations. Sometimes we put on rose-colored glasses and we think things are better than they are. So for you, I'm going to suggest that on your list, they're available. They're not entangled with anybody else. They're available. They would like to have a relationship. If marriage is what you want, then they need to want marriage too. That's what that is. If you have preferences about whether they have kids or not, that can go on there. You can even write down things about like physical characteristics that you like and things about the type of work they do and the way they like to spend their free time. Do they like to camp or do they like to go to bars? Or, what do you like to do and what kind of partner would be perfect for you? And you write it down, and you write it down bravely, because believe me, when you write down everything you want, there are some things you're not going to get. So don't even worry. Don't worry that you're going to look foolish. You're not going to look foolish to anyone because you're doing this for you. You're getting clear about what you really want. And when you have that clarity and you're like vibrating with that clarity, you go on a date and somebody's really falling short in some big thing. It's like, well, they're great in like 10 ways. And, they're still living with their ex-wife, but they say they're going to get a divorce. Your heart will begin to go, mm-mm. And that's what clarity is. Okay. So then you realize these are probably dead ends, but you have this deep urge to pursue them both. I don't want to demean that, but that might just be like physical desire. And that's real. And I'm going to go against the culture here and say you do not have to follow up on that if you don't want to. I just think in this case, after everything you've been through, anything that's going to like trigger more trauma coming up, it's going to just kind of get in your way. The fastest route to true love and great sex would be to forego all these half-assed versions of it that you don't want, right? Let it go and be busy dating. Go online if you need to, go join things, go do the things that people do when they want to date. It works, all right? It works. In the meantime, we've been talking about the guys and how to fit with them. But of course, the most central thing about how to bring this about in your life is to work on the stuff in you that's making you play small and avoid. And when you said you think you might be a sex and love anorectic, I think that could be true. And the great thing about that is there's a 12-step program for it. And if anybody watching doesn't know what that is, it's kind of what it sounds like. Somebody who's a food anorectic, they avoid eating. Somebody who's a sex and love anorectic avoids those things. That doesn't mean that you don't want it, but there's something about it that kind of shuts down your ability to move forward, or your knowledge and clarity about how to move forward to have that in your life. And when you go long enough without that relationship, I think you get rusty, and it can be very easy for denial to come in, looking outward at things, not seeing one's own part. And so that's what I think is the brilliant thing about 12-step fellowships, is that it's an opportunity to just, in the context of people who like you and care about you and support you, to gradually, in your own time, see, what am I doing that's part of this, and get some help. If you think about getting a sponsor, look for the woman who has got the best recovery in the room and ask her. Try to get the strongest sponsor you can. Don't play small with sponsors by getting somebody who you think, like I used to sponsor, right? And I used to sponsor some people who played small, and they would be like, well, I was thinking of asking you to sponsor me, but I know you're really busy, and then they wouldn't call me. And I'd say, look, I'm not busy. I raised my hand. I said I would sponsor. I said yes. You can trust me. If I say yes, I mean yes, which is a sign of recovery. And that's not to say there aren't sponsors who grow resentful and fade out on you. It happens sometimes. When that happens, you move on. You go get the best sponsor you can. And you get some help working through facing reality, facing the real truth about your condition. And I put it that way because when I was in the worst place in my life, that was the basic prayer I had. Please show me
the reality of my condition. And some things I learned about that were about myself and the way I have relationships. I made a lot of mistakes and it was hard for me to face. It was hard for me to take responsibility. So I'm so glad I got help to do that in a measured way, in an honest and humble way. And humility means like to be honest about what I did wrong, but not to just get all grandiose and be like, oh, I'm so horrible. Not that either, but just like realistically, okay, I see what the problem with me, I think I understand what happened. And, you know, when you get to that level of healing and you're doing that, you are getting close to the top of the mountain. It's very powerful to be there. And I would just say most people never get there. I've sat in thousands of 12-step meetings, and a lot of people come and listen, and some people sort of get going in the steps, but it's the ones who just like really like all out try to understand, what have I been doing to hurt the people around me and to hurt my chances of living the life I want to live? And answers will come. And sometimes you'll cry, and sometimes people will be unkind, but mostly people are going to be loving to you, and they're going to be really supportive of what you're trying to do, and they're going to help you. What you thought sex might do is make a space for your desire for your relationship, and help you do some healing in that space, so that when the time comes that you do get connected to somebody, you have so much more in the way of inner resources, rather than being identified with that girl who was left out and ostracized and treated as different and abused and neglected. Rather than that, you have you. You have you, Kira. You have the good in you and all you have to give. And I'll tell you what men are looking for. They're good men who want a relationship. They're looking for someone who has goodness to bring to the mix, who when you two hang out together, it feels good and both of you sort of come up to a higher level. So your job now is to become somebody who's capable of that. And when you're doing that, you will be surprised. There's so many elements of this that you don't have to make it happen. It's going to make you radiant. It's going to make you send off positive signals that healthy men are going to notice. And so it starts in here, and it starts with you being clear about what you want and then setting boundaries so that you're not getting all entangled and drained with what you don't want. So that's my answers, that sometimes having higher standards and more control over how everything turns out for you, it does involve being reserving the best in you, but getting very, very busy in recovery. So I'm really proud of you that you got started. Sometimes it takes a little time. I do think the 12-step thing is good. And that when you talk about eroticized feelings of longing, that's something I said in a video here that I never heard anybody else say. And I said it, and so many people who watch my videos were like, yes, eroticized feelings of longing. That's part of limerence. So a little bit of longing can be healthy for a relationship, but if all your romantic and sexual energy is going into the longing, you just got taken off the planet sexually. Nothing's going to cut it for you from that place. So just the water's fine, Kira. Come on in, find some recovery for this. And you get to, if you choose, if you work with a sponsor, your sponsor will have different criteria. Some people say wait a year. Some people are like, no, just be working the steps. You'll find out. You'll find your path. You can see why some people say wait a year before you go on any dates. I'll tell you a secret right now. Waiting a year doesn't change anything if you're not like working rigorously to change the insides, right? You can't just like avoid dating, indulge in the isolation. I've seen people, they're like, I'm out of this. And then one date and they're just, right? I was never somebody to delay. When I wanted to date, I dated. And I got my results, which were always terrible, especially when I didn't want to see my part in things. So I got through that one day when I really just went all in.